Hi, friends. Welcome, everyone. Welcome here to an awesome roundtable conversation. Every year that goes by, some of us, we all have the benefit of another years of experience, another years of perspective. And what makes experience valuable over time is when we have cumulative years of experience. I remember Charles Walters making the comment that um, unfortunately, there are many growers who don't have 40 years of experience, have 1 year of experience 40 times. But when we are able to reflect back on the things that we've learned before, the experiences that we've had, and we have cumulative experiences, that's where experience becomes wisdom. And so in that context, I wanted to have I've been looking forward to having conversations with Mike Omeg and Michael Thompson and Kelton Coleman on kind of a reflection of where we are, where's the state of agriculture, where's the state of the industry, in their particular operations, what have we learned, and what is the pathway forward? A lot of many growers are very challenged economically. Economic times for growers of many crops, and what's the pathway forward? How do we take the experience and the wisdom of the past and apply that to a better future going forward? So within that context, let's do a quick round of introductions. And for each of you, tell us a little bit about your farming context, your operation, the type of environment you're growing in, the crops you're growing in, and also your major challenges, particularly as they relate to economics and agronomics, and what's happening and what's going on. So, Mike Omeg, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your operational setting.
Well, thanks for having me on the webinar, John. I really appreciate it, and I hope to learn as much as I share today with the other guests here. I farm about 3,600 acres of cherries in the Oregon, in northern Oregon, in the Columbia Gorge. Really beautiful area. We're blessed with good irrigation water and good soils and a good climate for growing fresh cherries. We grow anywhere between 11 and 16,000 ton of cherries, depending on the year. And the big thing for me is I'm blessed and cursed in that I have a perennial crop. And so sometimes I love that I can build my crop over time and I don't have like a field of cabbage that gets turned in. I can see the changes in my trees, and that's a really fulfilling thing. But it also is a challenge because sometimes I wish I could just start at zero when I end up going down the wrong rabbit hole, so to speak. But I've been using AEA for probably close to 15 years or so, and really done some great things on our production side. We face in tree fruits a lot of challenges.
That's incredible. I didn't realize it was that long. That's a long time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely is. But our challenges are changing weather and a changing regulatory environment. Regulation is becoming more difficult for a high labor crop like ours. We take a lot of people to hand harvest our crops and do a lot of the work. And then a changing global economic landscape because of strife.
And Mike, how has just digging into the changing climate and environment, has that had any impact on pest pressure, insect pressure, or how the plants respond, heat stress, etc.? How has that been manifesting for you?
Well, I think for us, we look at the weather record here in the Dalles where I live, and we have a record from 1874, and six of the last 10 daily highs have been set since 2020 here. So we have definitely been warmer. We have an ever increasing number of days of the year where we're over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty darn warm for a crop. And that is just basically a bag of water and sugar and pretty delicate, like a cherry is. And then we have an ever decreasing number of days that are cold in the wintertime, which is important for the physiology of the tree. So I would say that heat stress or weather stress, however you want to phrase it, is the major impact on our cropping systems and on the
So,
people doing the work, of course.
so one more question, Mike. Historically, it used to be true that uh, the tree fruit crops and vegetable crops were viewed with perhaps a certain level of envy by broadacre crop growers. Like these are the really high value crops where there's the opportunity for significant returns. How has that shifted over the years?
Not in the direction I would like to report. It's becoming, for the past 3 or 4 seasons, we have had close to zero or negative returns in the tree fruit industry. Apples, cherries, like I grow, it's very, very challenging. And a good portion of that is from our margin shrinking because we're labor intensive and the cost of labor is going up at a rate that's far beyond any price increases. Our labor cost has gone up by over 20% since 2020, for example. It takes a lot of hands to do our work to get the trees farmed. We are not mechanized in many of our operations that we have to do to grow our crops. And so pruning and harvest require many hundreds of hours per acre, and that's all done by hand.
Yep. It's an interesting environment to be operating in for sure. And interesting in the sense of the Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. Um, yeah, thank you, Mike. Kelton, can you tell us a little bit about the setting that you're farming in and what your farming operation looks like?
Yes. So I farm in the southern panhandle. That'd be around Brownfield, Texas. Farm mainly cotton, peanuts, and wheat. We'll have the occasional corn or chilies. I like to try lots of different things. So I kind of sometimes that's not a good thing, but I continue to try them. About 50% of my land is what we call conventional, still using herbicides. And then about 50% of it is organic. And I have been with AEA 100% regenerative approach to nutrition for the last 2 years. And then we started in 22, but that was a NPK based approach, then adding biology on top of it in 22. And then 23 and 24 have been just regenerative.
And Kelton, if I remember correctly, you sent me a message at one point this summer, maybe June or early July, on about your peanut crop, where you were quite ecstatic about some of the things that you were seeing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was. I hadn't seen it like that, so we were typically we see flowering come in bunches, and then by late in the season, you would have flowered all the way to the end of the limbs on the peanuts. And right in mid-July, we were already at the end of the peanut, so a lot more early fruiting. Only drag was there is that farm water started pumping off and cut short, and we didn't get to realize the positions that we had put on. But it was typically we don't even see that every year fruiting all the way to the end of limbs. Maybe that's every couple years, but this year we were seeing that 45 days earlier than I'd ever seen it before. So we
You
were
know, I think farming has more what if stories than fishing.
yeah, yeah.
It's like you get so close, you can see them on the line and then they get away. Why does that happen?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kelton. Kelton, what's the scale and the scope of your operation? You mentioned the different crops that you're doing, but what's the setting in terms of scale and size?
I'm 95% irrigated, uh, and we irrigate about 6,000 acres. So I guess we probably got about 4,000 that's organic and about 2,000 that's conventional, but it's all irrigated. Yeah.
What do you do when you're not twiddling? Oh, never mind. You're never twiddling your thumbs. Okay. Um, over to you, Michael Thompson. Can you tell us a little bit about your contextual setting and operation?
So, like Kelton, I'm in West Texas in the Panhandle, a little bit north of him. Um, grow primarily cotton. We do rotate in wheat, corn, grow some alfalfa. 100% regenerative ag across the board, probably for the last 4 or 5 years. We've been using AEA. I'd say, we're mainly irrigated, but that irrigation's starting to dwindle. So we're really having to come up with ways to make that irrigation effective. One thing, the reason I do rotate, this is really cotton country, so heavy cotton, but I rotate with wheat and corn on the same pivots to divide up that irrigation schedule. So we can spread that out further across the year and then utilize water when we're not needing to water other crops to make it go further. But in our area, dryland farmers, maybe 1 out of 6, 7 years they make a crop. And irrigated farmers, they make one every year, but it seems like it's not a consistent relied upon yield. And with margins being so tight, it's really easy to fall behind for sure.
Yeah, the two of you would really like to have, you would give a lot to have Mike Omeg's water, that's for sure. Yeah. So you mentioned the three crops that you're growing, Michael. What can you get us a sense of scale and how your rotation divides up?
So on a pivot, 136 acre pivot, to give you an example, if you're watering the whole pivot, you've got maybe 3.5 gallons a minute. So if we divide it out into a third, wheat, corn, cotton, well, come June, you harvest your wheat, and then you can use the full pivot worth of irrigation for 2/3. So then you're getting 5.25 gallons per minute per acre. And then depending on when you plant your corn, we try to get it to where corn we can pull off mid-August. And that's where that cotton really needs that water. And we've got 10.5 gallons per minute per acre to put on that third. So we can really push that cotton in August when it really needs it. We're irrigating more of the year, but we're able to put out what it needs when we don't get the timely rains. And that's the deal, is we will get rains, but we may get half of the year's rain in a day and then nothing for 2 months or 3 months. So really you can't depend on the rain, and how we farm, we really farm like it's not going to rain. And then if we get a rain, then it's a bonus.
So Michael and I had a really good day. What is it now? Almost a year ago. We had a group of 10 or 12 people in the same room that I'm sitting in right now, where we dug our noses into the literature and into the research on cotton as far as we could go in a day to try to figure out how can we make every year a cotton year. Michael, can you tell us what is a cotton year?
Well, a cotton year is when it's really unknown whether you're going to have a cotton year until you pull in that field to harvest it. And then once you pull in, and it seems like maybe 1 out of 7 years you actually have a cotton year. But in the years you have a cotton year, it seems like everybody across the area has a cotton year, and cotton just makes. It might look the exact same as it did the previous 5 years, but there's something different there.
So you're out there, you're doing yield checks, you have boll counts, the boll count per acre, but for some reason the quantity of lint in each boll, the quantity of lint that comes off the field is much higher than you would expect based on the yield estimates.
Right. You can have, big, beautiful plants with a lot of bolls, same bolls. The cotton looks the same, and you could be a bell difference from, year to year. And you can have a cotton year and have these little shrub of a plant you think on a typical year might be a half a bell, and it's 2.5 bell. That cotton is there. It's in those bowls. And really, when we had our meeting, it was what I wanted to get out of that meeting is what makes a cotton year, and how do we duplicate that, and what goes into actually making cotton. And and I think putting all that together this year, I feel I had a cotton year. You can talk to all the neighbors around, and I'd say 95% of them said it was a horrible year. It was definitely not a cotton year. So I think we've done something, and I hope we can expand on it
So,
and really narrow down, a program for it.
so what did you experience this year, Mike? If or Michael, if 95% of your neighbors did not experience a cotton year, that means it wasn't something that you did in the geographic area. So what were the crop responses that you got? What was more than you're describing something that was more than the expectation, but what did you see?
Well, to sum up what the year was, we had a really good start. In May, we had timely rains throughout the month of May, not just on one day. We had some early summer rain. So across the board, everybody got to the head start. Got a good start. Everybody looked the same. Come August is where it really turned, and we had a horrible August. Probably one of the hottest August on record. Absolutely no rain, and that followed into September. September was really hot with no rain, and that's really where you make your yield is in August, and it doesn't look any different, field to field. But as long as you were set up to take those challenges, then I was able to benefit because cotton does like the heat, but it also needs that water. But I think I was set up in a way from a lot of the things I did this year that it overcame that negative of that August, where other guys, August just destroyed them.
So what were your final harvest outcomes, Mike? I haven't talked with our team yet. I don't know what the data is or what the story is of what's been happening.
So my best field, which is what we harvested first, it did a little over 3.3 bell to the acre. I want to say, I think the other two good AEA fields were 2.7 and I think 2.6. So to put that in comparison, some of the guys that harvested first that had some really good drip patches, they were pulling in right at 2 bell and 3/4, some a bell and a half. And their cotton looked just as good as mine, I thought, but it was, a good bell to bell and a half difference.
And for context for people who aren't familiar with cotton production, what is your operating break-even perspective? What are your break-even yields?
You almost have to do, well, it depends on the price of cotton, but current price sitting at 68 cents, you almost need to make 3 bell to break even. If it's at 80 cents, you could do 2.5 bell, 2 3/4. A dollar cotton, you can get away with 2 bell, but it really depends on the price of cotton.
Yeah, I think your note on climate resilience and climatic extremes, and Mike, I'm interested in what this is Mike Omeg directed to you, and what you've experienced when you reported those temperature highs over those temperature peaks that you've experienced the last several years. How do you mitigate against that? How do you manage that in what we can expect to see, I think, increasing temperatures and increasing climate vagaries. How do you manage that in a cherry operation?
Well, we're planning in the long run on having warmer temperatures with more heat. And that does a lot of things to our crops. It makes our harvest window shorter, which hurts efficiencies because we count on spreading harvest over a longer period of time. But brass tacks are healthy trees resist heat and cold way better than trees that aren't as healthy. And that's all, it's a spectrum. So I don't believe we reach a threshold on plant health of our trees and we're good. I think that there's a increasing benefit, at least we haven't seen where we've got our trees to a maximum, where after that point, we have diminishing returns on how they resist heat. So number one thing is we want to have big leaves that cover our cherries to provide shade and protection from wind. And the other thing is we want to have trees that are holding fruit that have a lot of, I'll say, good integrity. We want the fruit to be physiologically heavy and dense. Those scenarios where a tree has good, big, dense fruit that are covered well by leaves are what, in our experience, resist temperatures extremes better. At the same time, that same tree in the wintertime and in the spring, the buds on that tree, in our experience, are more resistant to frost events as well.
Mike, I was just going to go there because I've been traveling the last couple of weeks. I was at the Great Lakes Fruit and Vegetable Expo. The week before that, I was at the Acres Conference. And as I travel around to events, I think it has to be in the one of the top 10 questions I get asked all the time is how do we manage plant nutrition for frost resilience and for freeze resistance? And I every time I hear that question, I'm reminded of your experience in what is it, 2017 or I forget the exact date when you had that.
2014. In 2014.
2014.
Yeah. In November of 2014, we went from a low of in the 40s, 43 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty warm, to -6 below zero. And that's a drastic change and froze the leaves right on the trees and they turned black.
Yeah, and that shift, how rapidly did that happen? How many days? How many hours?
In one day. In one day. It was 43 at my house for the low, and then it went down to -6 at my house. Killed roses to the ground. And interestingly enough, at that time, we were evaluating, we had side-by-side comparisons with an AEA based program and my approach, which isn't purely conventional at that time. And believe it or not, those orchards were a quarter-mile apart, same elevation, same rootstock and variety of tree. And my trees under the Omeg treatment froze to the ground. We had about 6 inches of snow and the tree died back down to there. And that's a bad day. And the trees in the AEA area looked like nothing had happened. It was pretty amazing. And they actually picked a crop that following spring. So that's one of the things why I started cheating and quit doing a side-by-side comparison and just went pretty much all in.
We don't like it when that happens, Mike. We like it when it happens, but we don't like it when that happens. But yeah.
And so, I think something that in at least in tree fruits, and I think probably other woody crops, those buds are like a little suitcase. When it goes into winter, they aren't going to get anything from the rest of the tree. They only have what they went into winter with. So they only packed their suitcase in late summer and fall. And you have to be really sure that they get what they need so that if the going gets tough with cold, that they can be hardier than buds that don't have what they need. So I was just out with our AEA agronomist a couple days ago, and one of the things I've noticed over time, and this is just eyeball spit shooting farmer evaluation, is I believe that our buds are much larger on average than they were previous to an AEA approach. And that has two benefits, in my opinion. One is just the surface to volume ratio for resisting cold events, because oftentimes it's maybe only a period of an hour or two at an extreme temperature, and then it warms up. It's not as if it's sub-zero for a month. The other thing is that those larger buds have more flowers per bud, which means that our crop potential is higher, which is a benefit. If it's going to get cold and you're going to lose some to frost, you have more to lose, so to speak.
Well, Mike, I know the question that I get asked all the time and the question that people will have listening in is, how do you do that? How do you manage nutrition to have those large buds and those energy-filled or nutrient-filled buds to give you that freeze protection? What are the important components?
I think everyone wants a recipe, and I'm going to say it depends as a qualifier, but I'll tell you what works. What's worked for me in the School of Hard Knocks has taught me um, that we do need to measure. I used to be against measuring. I thought, well, if we measure and then go out, we measure with the micrometer and cut with a chainsaw, so to speak. But one of the things that I've seen is that we've been able to increase the resilience of our trees and our crops and our fruit by quite a bit by using sap analysis. And so by targeting certain nutrients, there's not just one key nutrient that I can say, we're up your copper and you're golden. I don't think that's the case. I think it's an overall approach of ensuring that you don't have severe deficits or severe excesses, which is just as important as you always say, John, in getting those trees balanced. You're going to have bigger leaves, and those bigger leaves contribute all that energy to growing those buds and making sure those buds are big. So it's actually, to me, less about the nutrients in the sap of the tree that are going into the bud saying, well, we need more boron or manganese or whatever. And it's actually more about, let's keep the leaves as big as we can on the tree so that the canopy can support a root system and biology in the soil that can gather what the tree needs and put it into the bud for the winter.
Yeah.
And I think also on the inverse is true, if you will, in the summertime when those fruit are under stress from heat or wind or whatever you may say disease or pests. You want to have the same thing. You want to have a big canopy and a big root system, making sure that the tree itself is gathering what it needs to the maximum. So when I'm thinking about what am I growing, I'm actually less excited about the cherries and more excited about those leaves that are going to make the cherries happen.
That sounds very heretical, Mike.
If you know me, you know I'm a heretic. So welcome to the club.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. As I've been, I'm going to bounce back to you, Michael Thompson. As we've been, my phone is blowing up and people are sending me direct messages in the chat and they're saying, no, you can't let Michael Thompson get away with not telling us what he did to his cotton crop. So tell us a little bit about what did you do to produce such a different outcome than others in the area?
Okay. So to kind of start it off, going back to that cotton think tank we had, to figure out what makes the cotton, you got to realize that fiber initiation and quantities of fiber per seed per lock, locks per bowl, they're determined really early. You're talking about 40 days before bloom, which is about 20 days after emergence. Yeah. So if you have that in mind,
it's tall.
in the past, we've always taken a sap at the first true leaf, and once we got the results back, got the foliar, put it on. Really, we're 10 days too late for that first 4 or 5 bowls influence. So what we really did this year, probably the most important thing is we had a good in-furrow, knowing what nutrients were responsible for fiber initiation. Had that in-furrow with the seed. We also did a seed treatment with a lot of those micronutrients, along with BioCoat Gold and some inoculants. And then we did a proactive foliar. When we would normally be doing a sap at the first leaf, we went ahead and put an application by looking at the saps the last 4 years to see at that first true leaf, what was we lacking, especially in those nutrients that are responsible for that fiber initiation. So putting that out, we were set up with a lot of potential. We weren't handicapped from the beginning. If you keep in mind that first node positions, it makes up 60% of your yield. You get a new bowl developed every 3 days. So, it's critical to be right at the beginning. And the main nutrients responsible for that, you got to have carbs in the bowls for that lint production. So, we really focused on manganese, boron, and potassium. They're critical for that carb movement. So throughout the season, we did like we normally did, pulled saps, did foliar adjustments throughout the season, but we always put the nutrients that were really responsible for that fiber development. And then we also wanted to keep that short internode spacing, and then we wanted to optimize photosynthesis. So doing those two things throughout the season, I think set us up for the most part to have the potential, and it was really on us not to lose the potential. I'd say probably the third thing that we did that normally we don't ever do throughout the year. With cotton, it's really hard to get a stand and to get a good healthy plant. Cotton comes up looking for a reason to die. So once you get that cotton plant up and healthy, you kind of forget about it because cotton's not going to need water for a while. But one thing that we've kind of overlooked is our soils, now that we're no-till, they're getting extremely dense. We have compaction layers. As long as we have moisture in the soil, you can put a probe in, no problem. But if it is dry, you can't stick anything in the ground. Well, that young root is kind of doing the same thing. So we made sure we had a full profile to start. And then we kept that soil moist throughout that early root development to where we could get a large root package throughout the soil. And I think it really helped come August whenever we had such a brutal August.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mike. You're so spot on. When I'm down in your area next and we're talking to a group of cotton growers, we're going to have some very authentic heart-to-heart conversations about compaction that some people might not like the outcomes of that conversation, but there's some major compaction issues. And also, Michael, just yesterday, I'll give you a bit of a sneak peek. Yesterday, I saw some of the data from the replicated cotton treatment trials where we were experimenting with foliar applications of accelerate at different stages and at different rates. We wanted to figure out what's the optimal rate, what's the optimal stage. And I don't think we have any conclusive evidence on rates, but all of the evidence, at least for the trial we ran this year, was that earlier is better. The earlier we put it on, the early applications, we were experimenting with different application rates, but the peak ROI, and this was including application cost, the peak ROI was with 4 quarts of accelerate at pinhead square, and lifted my eyebrows as high as they could go, 45x ROI. I want more applications in that category, please. That was pretty incredible. So I think there's a lot of things for us to learn there. And so, yeah, for all of you cotton growers listening, we're going to, I don't know if I'm going to be at an event in Texas or somewhere this year, but we're going to either have a live event or have a webinar series talking about some of the stuff we've learned in cotton this year, because I think we are on the threshold. I mean, we've got 1 year of experience and we all know what agriculture is like. Next year, we'll have a different experience. We'll have to learn some things again. But I think we stand on the threshold of figuring out how to make every year a cotton year, and that makes me pretty happy. Yeah. Kelton, we haven't heard a lot from you at this point. Can you tell us a bit? You've been using the AEA system for 2 years now. What have you experienced that has been different? How have your last 2 years been different from what you experienced before? What have you learned and observed about a biological system? Sometimes it's Mike Omeg has a pretty awesome memory and he tends to not forget things. But for so many of us who have a lot of experience, we sometimes forget the benefit of a fresh perspective. And you have the benefit of having a fresh perspective coming into this. So I'd love to hear what you've been experiencing and noticing.
Ideally, whenever I came to the AEA, I heard the message of insect resistance, and that in my organic cotton, we had experienced a year in 22 where we had a large amount of acreage that got totally wiped out. It was totally wiped out at the 1st of September. And so, that was the goal of coming to to AEA and working with them was to see if we could accomplish, what y'all's message was, and we have. So we went 2 years. I mean, we will see insects in the field as they're moving. So it's not the absence of insects, but it just seems that our plants are not the ones that they want. So they will just move on because we have not had any insect damage in that sense for 2 years in a row, because that was a big issue that I'd had. So that's been a big change. And then, trying to provide, in the years past, I had made really big yields, but I'd also had absolute failures because of insects, because of disease and everything else. And the economics of farming, it doesn't pay to be able to brag in the coffee shop about one circle while a whole bunch of them didn't do very well. And so trying to provide consistency, and I saw that this year. We did see consistent yields across a lot of acreage. We did not have near the boom and bust that we had had in the past. And so providing consistency and providing insect resistance has probably been the two big things. Now
And Kelton, I'm remembering, I think it was actually a conversation with you. I've had several conversations about dealing with compaction, but the comments I mentioned just a bit ago, I think a conversation I had with you a while ago actually triggered some of that. Tell us about what you've been observing with compaction on your operations and others in the area, and how are you, because I think so easy for us to ignore the things that we don't see visually, and particularly in the world that you are in, where no-till agriculture has been strongly promoted, justifiably and understandably from a wind erosion perspective. You've actually ended up with completely unsustainable levels of soil compaction that are being systemically ignored, and we hope that they'll just go away magically somehow.
right. So we, in understanding the biological system and to get the biology, if that's where we're going to move dollars to, we need that biology to be able to breathe. And it really became profound about 18 months ago. We had an area of a couple fields that were blowing. The cover crop had blown out, and so areas of them we took a deep break and plow to. And we deep broke them about 14 inches. This was just parts of fields, and then was all treated the same. Those both were fallow fields that year, so we plowed them and kept them clean that summer, which would have been last summer. And then we planted wheat for harvest into those fields. And those fields where we had taken a break and plow, which is a no-no in a lot of world of don't till, it's all bad. Where we had broke. On one field, the unbroke area was 20 bushel at wheat harvest, and the broke area was 50. And then the other field where we did that, it was 30 and about 60. So we saw that as a big, and I can see it even now. So we're seeing that breaking plow, I don't know that it has to be done every year. It has at least a 2-year, but I really think about a 3-year effect. But I don't mean to keep going. But what we did in September is we went and took a backhoe and started digging holes, looking at cotton roots. And to the level at which we had ran that breaking plow, that root went right down, and then it turned sideways, and they were all running sideways because of that. The breaking plow, it breaks apart what's above it, but we're right there. It's all that pressure from that tractor pushing down. It's also making a smear level there at about 14 inches. That I think that is the start of where we have a hard pan. And when we went to measuring hard pans, we dug down 4 foot. We have no roots except in the top 12 to 14 inches, and we're still pulling 2.5 bale cotton, 3 bale cotton. And I'm going, what is the potential if we can actually drive a root system down? Now, I'm different than Michael Thompson in the fact of I really don't want to water very early, and I'm having to figure that out because of the amount of weed pressure that will come with that early water. And so on my conventional ground, we can, but on my organic, it's something we are trying to figure out. But that we dug down, there were no roots below 12 to 14 inches, wherever at that point in the field the breaking plow was running. And we stuck a knife way down below at 3.5 foot, and it would run all the way up to about 21 inches. So we were dealing with a hard pan of about 6 to 7 inches. And then, it's like, well, no wonder we couldn't make it through the August heat. If we don't have 10 gallons, per minute able to put on that cotton, if we've only got 4 or 5, because there was moisture below that hard pan, we were just not accessing it. And so trying to figure.
So, Kelton, for the folks who are not from the panhandle of Texas, what is a breaking plow?
It's basically taking everything that you would say is good and green on top or anything like that, and it's flipping it 100% upside down.
What other names does a breaking plow have? A moldboard plow?
A moldboard plow. Yeah.
Moldboard plow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a breaking plow was.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I was pretending that nobody else did either. Yeah. Yeah. So there's been some great questions that have come in on the chat, some from Mike Omeg as well. But before I go to those, there was a good question here. It was a question on insect pressure on cotton. This is a question for you, Kelton, and for Michael Thompson as well. And the way the question is framed is insecticides costs for insect control are a significant expense for cotton production. I know that's particularly true in the Delta. It's true in different parts of the world. How has your shift in nutrition management reduced your insecticide applications at all, if at all?
My insecticide applications have went to 0.
And how rapidly did that happen?
Well, I guess I'm just kind of one of those guys. When I get an idea and I think it's going to work, we're just going to find out if it works, and it did. So we used to put on. So that year in 22, whenever I had 5 or 6 circles that got totally wiped out, I won't say the product names, but I had put organic insecticides. It was a combination of 2, and we had put them on 3 times. And at that point in time, I had spent roughly $100 an acre in insecticide and still got wiped out by insects. And so whenever we can combine the reality of making a plant insect resistant, but at the same time also making that plant healthy through nutrition, it has worked well. So my insecticide costs have went down. We really haven't went after insects as far as looking at saps. Going after insects, we just looked at the saps and say, hey, this is what we need, and we applied it. We would apply the same thing regardless of insect pressure or not. That's what the sap showed that the plant was lacking. So we put it on, and the bugs, just went away.
What has been your experience, Michael Thompson?
I hadn't applied an insecticide probably in 4 or 5 years. We really don't see the pressure. Some of the neighbors do, but I also hadn't used synthetic fertilizer in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think not having nitrate levels in the leaves to attract the insects and to be a host, there's better hosts elsewhere across the fence. So we really hadn't seen it. And I think I had 1 year that I got wiped out by insects, and it was, I forget the name of the bug, but anyway, it was mainly because it was so dry and I had a cover crop and nobody else did. So my cover crop was a host to the bugs. And then when that cotton's trying to come up, they just annihilated it. But if I would have had a better management of terminating that cover crop earlier to where I didn't have that bridge, I would have been fine. But so that year it got me.
Michael, for some reason, the way you framed your comments made me chuckle a little bit. The historical narrative, if there's an organic farmer around, is everyone blames the organic farmer for being the reservoir of pests that are then infecting everyone else around him. And now I think you can still be credited for sharing all of your pests with all of your neighbors because you're creating such an unappetizing ecosystem that they just go elsewhere.
Right.
So it's still your fault that your neighbors have all these pest problems, because you're not providing a suitable environment for them. No, I'm joking, of course, but yeah, for some reason the way you said that resonated with me a little bit. So, a question for you, Mike Omeg. Kyle Rash has shared a couple of questions here, but he would like to know, how do you manage SAP testing from a management and decision-making perspective, and how has it evolved from previous years? And I think where this question might be coming from is a question of trying to understand where are the critical windows, and also how do you use last year's SAP analysis data to make this year's management decisions?
That's a great question, and we could have an all-day webinar, maybe a week-long webinar, talking about how to use SAP analysis data. And so this is my take on it, having been one of the early adopters of it. Like Michael Thompson here, I think SAP analysis showed us that doing things early has a profound impact on our trees to be able to do things for themselves later. It's also shown me as a part of that trying to play catch up is not a place I want to be. That is too much stress. It drives me crazy. And so I want to be prepared. When a big shift I had when thinking about SAP analysis is, our trees are not automatons. They are not robots. They are not aircraft. They are not machines. They're living creatures. And I don't want to feel like I'm driving a team of horses when I'm growing my trees. I don't want to believe like I'm whipping them into shape by giving them boron or giving them manganese or whatever it may be. I want to believe that I know what the tree needs. I give the tree what it needs, and that tree is going to pull me along, and we're going to have a successful year by providing the tree with what it needs to get itself there. Our trees want to set great crops. They want to grow healthy fruit. They want to have no disease. They want to have no insects. So let's give the trees what they need. So when I look at SAP analysis, I try to look at trends over time, and I try to look at indicator blocks. We farm a couple of, thousands of acres. It's impossible for me to sample all those acres and then to have an individual nutrient plan for all those acres. So what I do is I look at indicator blocks to show me, how are we doing? Are we within a range that makes sense? And what are our trends? Trends to me are more important than the absolute values. And, I don't think that we can accurately say our boron needs to be at X level. We aren't there yet. I think AEA is going to be the team that maybe can get us there. But I rather like to look at, okay, what are my key nutrients at certain times of the year, whether that be calcium or potassium at those critical points. And am I going in the trend where I'm going to ensure that the trees have that nutrient in excess or in abundance? Maybe I shouldn't say excess, but in abundance at important times of the year. And in general, what I see is we don't need to be putting on as much nitrogen as we have historically. And I've cut back drastically on our nitrogen. It's not zero, but it's low enough that even the AEA agronomists started wondering if I had enough nitrogen in my crop. So I think I think I got the level at the right spot then. And I don't think we can ever get to a comfortable point for many of our micronutrients like manganese, like cobalt, like iron. Those are always going to be a challenge, and so I always want to be spoon feeding our crop those nutrients. And then there are certain nutrients that do seem to punch above their weight, so to speak, with, you get this big list and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to do everything. But there are nutrients that punch above their weight. And I would say for cherries, for example, copper is one of those. I want to have abundant levels of copper. That seems to allow our trees to be more resistant against powdery mildew and bacterial canker. Anecdotal evidence, not published, but that's what I see. And the other thing is, it seems to make our trees really resistant, or our fruit really resistant against fruit cracking. And so even if the SAP analysis says you're good with copper, I want to make sure that that copper never dips down. I want to hold it at that level or have it even creeping up. So that, I hope, is a quick cliff notes of a couple of examples of how we're using SAP analysis. I think the take home is you got to pick your battles with SAP analysis, or you'll try to do everything and you can be overwhelmed with the information. I think you need to have indicator blocks and not try to sample everywhere, because what happens is you dilute your thinking then, and that's really dangerous. SAP analysis, it's really easy to have your brain try to go in a million directions, have your agronomist go in a million directions. And that's not what it's about. It's about looking at trends over time. So how do I determine what I'm going to be applying in the spring before we have leaves? Because we're going on early before leaves are out to do SAP analysis. I look at things that we struggled with keeping in abundance during the season, and I make sure that I'm providing those foliarly and sometimes by injection in certain cases, fertigation, early in the season, as soon as we can start kind of getting on the ground, so to speak.
Mike, I have a follow-up question that has also been asked in the chat by several of the participants, and that is one of the things I've been talking about quite a bit in presentations is using SAP analysis to determine if you've earned the right to reduce insecticide applications or to reduce pesticide applications. And Michael and Kelton, I'd like for you to respond to this question as well. But for you, Mike, are there any particular nutrients that you look at or ratios that you pay attention to, or what nutrient levels do you look at to consider whether you've approached a threshold where it's possible to perhaps reduce pesticide applications, or are you looking at other indicators?
That's a great question. And I would say we aren't there yet. We do have several varieties, though, where we're reducing our fungicide inputs. So I just got done doing budgeting, because that's what we do this time of year when there's snow on the ground. And our spend on fungicides, for example, across all acres on average is around $700 an acre. That's real money if we can cut that back. And so when I'm looking at how do I reduce my fungicide or insecticide bill, I want to start by, again, not trying to do it everywhere in all cases across all situations, because I just have too many of them that we manage. But I look at varieties that are more resistant, that tend to be more resistant to say powdery mildew, because that's a big thing for us. And I start to back off on those when we have our micronutrients trending up, and our nitrogen, our overall nitrogen can be very high, our total nitrogen, but we want our nitrates low. I know that's really general. But that's the point where I'm at, because I'm still learning. I'm still on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a very high risk operation as well, Mike, where you can't afford to be wrong. You can't afford to discontinue the use of fungicides or insecticides prematurely, because it will cost you, and not just a little bit.
Yeah, the crop value can go to zero really quick. Like Kelton had that issue with insects. I have the same thing. And so, and we got, I got 1,000 people plus in harvest that are here, and 100 people full time plus, and we, the impact would be big. It wouldn't just be like, oh well, I'm gonna not have as many ribeyes this winter. So affects a lot of people.
Yeah. Michael Thompson, what are your thoughts on that question? How do you use sap analysis as an indicator tool, or what metrics do you use as an indicator for reducing insecticide and fungicide applications?
Well, with not using insecticide the last 4 or 5 years kind of correlates when started using sap. So really don't have an answer other than I have really, really, really low nitrate levels. So I think as long as that stays low, I probably won't have any issues. But if I ever see that tick up, then, might be aware that that could be an issue.
And Mike, let's just explore that a little bit. Why do you have such low nitrate levels? You mentioned a little bit ago that you're not applying any commercial fertilizer, but what are you using as a nitrogen source? How are you supplying adequate nitrogen levels to your crop?
So I only use compost every year. So, no 32 UAN, ammonium nitrate, none of that. And it's funny, I'll get, Wilbur Ellis or somebody will offer, hey, you need to pull soil samples. I'm like, yeah, if you want to. And then they'll come back and they're like, well, you have no nitrogen. You need to apply this and this and this. But I'll pull a Haney test and it'll show what nitrogen I have total, and I'm fine. Just in nitrate, it's 0. So I guess you don't get any with compost, or what you do gets used up, cycled. But I've noticed, and I've had soil tests before I started using compost, and I had plenty high nitrate levels. But with just using compost only, I don't have any nitrate levels.
That's a luxury. That's a resource that Mike would love to have. You'd love to have Mike's water. He'd love to have your compost. Yeah. Yeah, Kelton, can you respond to the question on sap analysis, pest control?
Yeah, and so we are at a 0 for nitrogen applications. We're not getting any nitrogen from compost. Yet it was kind of interesting, and we haven't figured out exactly where it came from. So this was the second year of no applied nitrogen, but yet we had pretty high nitrate levels in our cotton there for a period of time. And that's kind of what we look for, knowing that the insects are going to be coming in August normally. But we put on a foliar of some micronutrients, moly, and different things like that. And then when we pulled the next saps, everything had balanced back out. So that's typically what we look for, is just in that nitrate and ammonia level.
Got it. So there's many directions we could take the conversation, but what is it? How do you hope to see your operations evolve in the future? What have you learned over the last few years? What gives you hope in the current economic environment? We're in very challenging times. What are these strategies that you are thinking of incorporating for your operations in the coming growing season to manage the context that you're in right now, which is a constant struggle? Mike Omeg, I'll go to you first.
Man, I wish there was just a simple thing, those old calendars where you could just tear a page off and the answer's right there. You just wake up in the morning, tear the page. But this is something I think about a lot, because I want our farms, everyone who's connected here, to be in business another 100 years. And boy, it's the most obscure path. It's the most clouded way forward, I think, that I've seen in my lifetime. But I'll tell you what does give me hope, and that is I do see a path forward. AEA is going to be a part of it, and that is trying to keep our cost as managed as we can. What we need to do is, on the production side, we need to have more fruit per acre. We need to be able to sell more of that fruit for a profit. And what gives me hope, even when our labor costs are rising, regulatory environment is very difficult, and there's global strife because export is an important market for us. What gives me hope is that I have yet to see somebody come out to our place and eat a cherry that doesn't say, "Oh my gosh, I've never had this good a cherry. Like this is so good. Where can I get this?" And so for me, that means that there's tremendous opportunity to sell the crop that I grow, which is fresh cherries for people to enjoy here in the United States. And you know, we I grow a crop that people can use to feed their mind, body, and spirit. And I'm so excited because if folks see cherries in the store and they look great and they buy those cherries and they taste good, they don't even have to know that they're really good for them. They just need to come back and buy again. And that simple equation of having people want to buy more cherries while they're there in the market during the season is that's a pretty simple equation. So my job is to grow big, tasty cherries in as much as I can, and I believe that our markets are going to expand. And I believe that by me growing more cherries, you might think if you're an economist, and I will sheepishly say that I do have a degree in economics, which is scary. But that would say, well, gosh, if you have more cherries, the price is going to go down and you're all going to be in trouble. If we have more good cherries, we actually need the price to be low so that more people can afford to buy them and enjoy them. And so I'm okay with that because I truly believe that if we can produce more with our costs being what they are and have more people buying them, that's going to be an equation that works out in the long run. And my hope is that the public enjoying cherries and that the perhaps some policy things changing to have folks be more interested in eating fresh fruits in the marketplace, because that's the hard part that we don't control as farmers. You know, I have to know that people are anonymously enjoying the fruit that I grow because I don't sell direct. I can't do that. I mean, we sell semi-loads a day of fruit, mini semi-loads a day. I'm not going to have a fruit stand and move that. So I'm excited about that, and I believe that AEA is going to get me there. And I actually have gotten darn close a couple of times to a number you told me, and I thought you were crazy, John. I met you at an Acres USA conference walking around the trade show, and you told me, I think you could grow 50,000 pounds, 25 ton of cherries a year. And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is crazy. He doesn't know anything about cherries. And I've got there, and that was with good quality and high pack out and good pricing. And so I've got hope because of those things.
It only took 15 years.
Hey, I'm a slow learner, but I like to think my advisors are maybe as slow as me.
I'm sure you're correct about that. But you know, Mike, just on a personal anecdote, thinking about cherry pricing and consumer demand, for all of our listeners, Mike has given me an incredible gift. Not every year, but in the past, on several occasions, Mike sent us a 40-quart cooler of cherries shipped by FedEx overnight from their harvest. And believe me, that was a highlight of the year. But when I shared those cherries with family and friends, I was in disbelief about the number of people who like, oh, we never buy cherries. It's just they're temporary, they're seasonal, and cherries were not a fruit, even though we're in a very agrarian culture and society, cherries were not a fruit that they are growing here or that they're buying a lot of. And I know for a fact that that changed because of the experience they had with your cherries. And so if we can, I think just a sentiment of endorsement that I think what you're describing is that if more people can have that experience, an incredible experience of eating a cherry, because also historically many times people haven't had such great experiences with cherries.
Yeah.
And so if we can change that by having higher quality cherry in the marketplace at an affordable price, I absolutely believe that consumption will go up significantly. So, yeah. So anyway, so much for my diatribe there. But Michael Thompson, I'll go to you. What do you see as the hope for the future and the pathway for the future?
Well, the goal is always to be profitable so you could do it another year. Starting my soil health journey, if you will, it's not really a destination, but it is a journey. But it seems like it is an awful slow one. And it seems like every year you're learning by failing. And it seems like you're never going to get anywhere to where you can be profitable on a consistent basis. But I will say this year, it seems like we made leaps and bounds with the cotton production, and I have to thank you a lot for setting that into motion. So for the future, it's really perfecting that to where, every year truly can be a cotton year, but understanding how to make it happen and why it's happening, to where there's no question of you know by chance we did it. We want to do it on purpose. If we can do that, then we can be sustainable in the future and profitable. But if we can't, you know margins are so tight that it's going to be difficult to do it.
Yeah. Michael, I want to build on something that you just said. Michael and I have both talked a little bit about the cotton think tank day that we had here. And I don't deserve the credit for the discoveries that were made that day. And not so much fresh new discoveries, but a connection of dots, things that we learned and dots that were connected. And we had an incredible experience that I think James Johnson was kind of the instigator for it, and David Miller helped coordinate it and put it all together. And we had a group of I think maybe let's say 10 people around the table who were very experienced cotton farmers from all over the country. James Johnson, David Miller, and a handful of those people, some of them contributed their wealth of experience, their 20, 30, 40 years of experience. Some of them contributed deep knowledge in plant physiology. James Johnson came with a 4-inch binder full of papers that he had been reading and that he'd highlighted and bolded. And it was that coming together of information. We were able to have an incredible day of learning from each other and connecting dots. And I want to do many more of those. So for those of you listening, if you have a specific crop, what made it so powerful is we focused on a specific crop. We want to understand the physiology and how we manage this crop very deeply and very well. And in a single day, because of the people who were around the table, we came away with what we thought is a possible pathway forward to figuring out how to make every year a cotton year. And Mike Omeg, I see you nodding your head. You're now approaching 25 tons of cherries per acre. There's more opportunity to be untapped. Like, how can we work together as a community to do more of that? So I would encourage everyone to do that. Reach out to our team at AEA if you want us to collaborate. We'd love to participate in those conversations. But you can also, it's not limited to us. Do it amongst yourselves. There's so much opportunity there. So anyway, I've completely detracted from the conversation that we were having. I'm coming back to you, Kelton, with what do you see? Where is your pathway? What's your pathway forward in these challenged economic times?
Well, well, I do think one place, speaking on cotton to save money, is just seed cost. I farm on 30-inch rows, just kind of rare. Cotton will go to 36, mostly 40-inch rows. But I actually planted everything one in, one out. So I was planting cotton on 60s. And due to different environmental things, we left quite a few different fields where we were leaving just one plant per foot. And so we had a final plant stand of about 8,000 population. And even fields were part of them we replanted. Go ahead, John.
You were one plant per foot on 60-inch rows?
Yes.
Wow.
And even where we had different fields that were a little better, and I had a lot of different not purposeful tests, but they were out there, and I was like, well, let's just see what it will do. And 8,500 plants, long as they are spaced semi-evenly. There was no yield difference from 8,500 to 30,000. And a lot of the seed industry wants us to be planting 30,000 or 40,000. And I saw it time and time again this year that we did not. So economics of things, if you can, seed is a big part of the bill. And so I think that we can pull that back substantially. And like me, on, on my irrigated, so we're for sure, we're gonna make a crop with, and aside from a hailstorm or something like that, we're gonna make a crop. And so there, percent of planted acres is actually 66% planted. That's how they count it, whenever you turn it into the FSA. So what inevitably was my premiums on crop insurance and everything were down 30% as well. So seed costs dropped, premium for insurance dropped, but yet we've had 2 really dry years in a row. And I actually think, well, I'll get back to that, but my 60-inch cotton compared to last year where we were 2-1, which, or we were solid last year on different fields, my 60-inch cotton with a very slim stand out yielded everything that I had planted 2-1 or 1-1. And I attribute that back to everybody probably had a bale plus more acre on their set on their plant whenever August hit, like Michael was talking about, and people weren't able to make it through. And they had a shallow root system just like I did. But with plants, we had less plants per acre, and each one of those plants actually putting on more bolls per plant. We just did not stress, and we did not lose as much fruit as everybody else. So I think in the future, I do think that there are things that can be done to mitigate some of the cost.
Well, Kelton, I know that you are irrigated, but I've had I'm having more and more conversations with farmers in dryland environments where we're starting to think about what is the plant population relative to available water rather than to available land. All of a sudden, you get some much larger plant spacings, and just as what you've been experiencing, what you're describing, we're actually able to produce surprisingly high yields per acre because we have much larger, more robust plants with larger, more robust root systems. But Kelton, you had an idea that you bypassed a little bit ago when you were speaking there. I don't know if you remember what it was. I wish it could refresh your memory.
Oh, I was going to refer back to, well, don't mean to get into politics and things, but in the bill, now it may have came down because of all the other stuff that was in there, but specifically coming back to the farming here in West Texas, anybody that has went wide row or skip row to try to make a crop and try to get less of an insurance check, trying to give that crop a chance to wait a few more weeks for rain to come. And those are the guys planting skip row. There's a lot of other people that know that skip row will make the same thing, but in this environment, and especially in the drought years, you don't want to, cut economically what you can get back on the insurance side. And actually, whenever they come out with that progress payment or whatever they were calling it for the 24 crop, it said specifically that skip row would be given parity to solid. So they were finally not cutting the guys that were going skip row, trying to do things differently and rewarding them as it planted solid, because I think that they were realizing that those are the people that are actually, a lot of them that are trying to move forward and not just be collecting an insurance check. So that was good to see them recognize that.
Yeah, it's good to see some innovation happening in the crop insurance space, but also I think it's a recognition of the unfortunate reality that there are a certain set of growers who are farming the crop insurance system rather than their crop.
Right. Yeah.
It's challenging to speak that out loud on a webinar like this, but it needs to be said. Yes, Mike.
Hey, John, I wanted to follow up on something because believe it or not, there's a connection between what Kelton was saying on plants per acre and planting cherry trees. In one of the tactics that's been used in the tree fruit industry has been, as margin has shrank, has been to go very capital intensive on our orchard plantings. And so, a traditional orchard, you can drive a pickup in between the rows. Not the tree density is much lower, and some of an approach to try to capture more margin was to go very capital intensive, to put a trellis up where you have wire and posts per acre, a lot of trees per acre, and you end up with a tremendously high upfront and sunk cost in getting that orchard planted and into production. And I will say that especially where money's more expensive than it's been in recent past, with interest rates being what they are, and with the returns being more unexpected, with low returns or weather events, those hurt that much more when you have all those dollars sunk into acres, the capital dollars sunk in. And so I actually view one of the benefits of an AEA approach as being a way that you can generate more yield per acre without having to make that sunk cost investment, that fixed cost investment in the orchard infrastructure itself, and trees per acre and wire. And so to me, that really came to mind when Kelton was talking about reducing his seed cost. I think it applies for tree fruits also.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I want to say thank you for all the pieces that you've contributed. Thank you for all of our participants who've been here, who've asked questions, who've participated as well. Here's to a great growing season this coming year. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and Merry Christmas to everyone.